As another point of introduction of verbs, I want to talk about their principal parts and conjugation number. Whenever you deal with a Latin verb, especially on a worksheet or an exercise that I give you, I will give you the verb's 4 principal parts. We'll talk about what that means in the next slide. And the first thing you should always do is determine the conjugation number. Even if I don't ask that, you need to know what that means in order to manipulate the verb in whatever way I'm asking you to do. Whenever I ask you to do anything to a verb, I will provide the 4 principal parts of that verb. And the principal parts of a verb are just the elements you need to know in order to manipulate that verb into any verbal form, any tense, any voice, any mood. So if you know those 4 principal parts and you know the rules of Latin grammar, you can make any verbal form in the entire Latin language based off those 4 principal parts. The conjugation of the verb is similar to the declension of a noun. So in the same way that a noun belongs to a certain declension, and that's its family, and once you learn the rule of one first declension noun, you know the rule for all of them, verbs fall into conjugations, and there are 4 conjugations, and once you memorize the rules for the first conjugation verb, they will be the same for every first conjugation verb in the Latin language. Same with second, third, or fourth. So when you are dealing with verbs, I will almost always give you the 4 principal parts, and the first thing you should do is ask yourself, what conjugation does it belong to? And once you determine that, you can then move forward and do anything you want with that verb once you've learned the rules. So for basic regular verbs, they almost always have 4 principal parts that end in O, RE, I, and US. The O form of the verb is the I form. It's the present tense. If I wanted to say I verb of any verb in the Latin language, you can just copy that first form down. That is what's called the first person singular present tense. The RE form is what's called the infinitive, and it's translated to verb. The I form is what's called the perfect tense, and it's translated I verbed. And then the US form, that 4th form, is a participle, and it's translated having been verbed. Again, we're not going to see that much until the second year of Latin, but it's just good to know that if you have those 4 forms in front of you, you can do anything you want verbally with any verb in the Latin language. Some verbs don't have 4 principal parts, some only have 2, some have 3, but almost all the verbs and all regular verbs have 4 principal parts. Now, to determine what conjugation or what family a verb belongs to, you have to look at the second principal part, that infinitive form. And if it ends in ARE, that tells you it's a first conjugation verb. The EREs are either second or third, and I'll tell you how to differentiate those in a second. And then the IRE verbs are 4th conjugation. So on the one hand, you can think about these endings go in alphabetical order, if that helps you. A comes before I, A is first conjugation, I is 4th conjugation. With these two, the 2 EREs, 2 things are useful to know. First of all, this ERE, this is a long E, and this is what's called a short E. So if you're dealing with a textbook that has long marks on it, if there's a long mark, it's 2nd conjugation. If there's no mark, it's 3rd conjugation. But a lot of worksheets I give you will not have that long mark. So the way you are going to differentiate between 2nd and 3rd conjugation is you are actually going to look back at the first principal part. And if the first principal part has EO, it's going to be 2nd conjugation. And if the first principal part is just O, it's going to be 3rd conjugation, because that soft E, that short E, gets smushed out by the O in 3rd conjugation, but the E is strong and powerful in the 2nd conjugation, so it stays. So a good way to remember this is 2nd conjugation verbs have 2 vowels in the first form, if that helps. If you're doing the alphabetical thing and you're thinking EO comes before O, that might help. So if you see an ERE verb, you have to consult the first principal part to determine whether it's 2nd or 3rd. For 1st and 4th conjugation, ARE, IRE, you're golden. So let's practice with some verbs here. So clamo, clamare with that ARE, that tells you it's first conjugation. Habeo, habere, There's an ERE. You look to the first principal part. EO, so that tells you it's second conjugation. Ponoponere, ERE, you look over here. There's just an O there. That's third conjugation. Dormio, dormire, IRE, that's fourth conjugation. Let's look at a few more verbs. Ago, agere, ERE, jump over here. There's only an O there, so that tells you it's third conjugation. Audio, audire, with that IRE, is fourth conjugation. Do, dare, we have ARE there, so it's first. And then placeo, placere, the ERE, and you jump over here to the EO, and that tells you it's second conjugation. Last set here, ERE there, look to the left, EO tells you it's second conjugation. Rogo, rogare, it's first. Wendo, wendere, that with that O ending there is third. And then wenio, wenire, that is fourth. So I'm going to have you guys do an exercise online to make sure you understand these rules, but you just have to kind of memorize them, and then once you determine what conjugation a verb belongs to, you know that every verb in any conjugation follows the exact same pattern. So redeo in this slide is going to behave just like placeo in the last slide. Rogare in this slide will behave just like dare, which was in the last slide. Ago, agere is going to behave just like wendere, third conjugation. Dormio, dormire is going to behave just like wenio, wenire. So every verb in an individual conjugation behaves exactly the same.